Hi, I'm John Tyner with Tyner Property Management. We manage about 1,100 properties in the greater Sacramento area, and I want to talk to you today about a question I hear all the time, and that is this. With all the new hostile landlord laws, is it even worth keeping my property as a rental, or should I just sell it now? So we'll look at the pros and the cons to that decision. One of the first and most important pros is you already have a very low rate. A lot of owners have 3% loan rates or even lower. It's very unlikely that we're going to see any rates anywhere near that. So hold on to that loan because that money is really, really good money at 3%. You're not going to be able to do that anywhere else. Another issue is tax. A rental property actually has more tax write-offs than a home that you own or occupy yourself. So what I mean is our management fees, professional management fees are a write-off. Maintenance is a write-off. Any work you do to get your property ready to rent, so that's kind of any work that you do within about 6 months before you rent the property, can be written off. And then, of course, you still get depreciation and mortgage interest write-offs. So all those things are good. Even if you had to carry a little bit of a negative cash flow, after taxes, it might make more sense. Another great aspect is appreciation. We all know that over time, real estate goes up in value. And sometimes it goes way up in value. So if you hold that property longer, you'll enjoy that appreciation. Rental properties are also a hedge against inflation. They tend to pace with inflation. So when inflation comes in, rents tend to go up with the inflation. So if you have your money sitting in a bank, it's going to lose its value as inflation takes its course. But if you have your money in a rental property, it's going to tend to track with that inflation and keep up with it. Another aspect I love about residential real estate is that if you own it for a while, many years go by, and your equity position gets pretty high. In other words, the values go up such that maybe at first you got a 97% loan and you didn't have hardly any equity, but a few years later, maybe it's 50%. The house has doubled in value. You can refinance, take money out, and then buy another rental property. I call that giving birth. So sometimes if you hold a rental property long enough, it gives birth, and then you have other rental properties from it. My parents are older now, but they had properties that gave birth repeatedly, and they own quite a few properties. But this is a very important principle of holding real estate. In America, the number one driver for generational wealth is families that owned real estate. So generational wealth comes largely from owning and holding real estate. And then I love this thought too. The cheapest rental property to buy is the one that you already own. Right? There's no closing costs. It's the easiest property to get into because you just keep it. And finally, leveraged real estate multiplies the return on the investment far more than simple appreciation. And what I mean by that is say you put 20% down on a $500,000 home. That's $100,000 down. And that property goes up in value $300,000 over the next few years. That return is, if you think about it, your 100 just became $400,000. There's no other stock market or anything else that will do that fast. Leveraged real estate is the only tool that you can do that with. So to be fair, what are the downsides? There are some downsides, right? So some people cannot buy the next house that they need to move to unless they sell their existing home. And if that's your case, if it's the only way that you can afford to do it, then yes, you need to sell that property. Another thing is that you must plan for maintenance and vacancy costs. And a lot of people worry more than they should about those. We have 1,100 properties, and we've managed properties for 50 years. Our average vacancy factor has run between 1% and 2% all of that time. And then maintenance costs tend to run about the same, 2% maybe of the rent. So they're not real high, but you do need to plan for vacancy costs. And then, if you're so tight on your budget that if your HVAC went out, you had to replace the air conditioner, and that may be so costly for you, it could be $10,000, $12,000 or more. If there's no way you could do that, then this may not be the right avenue for you. Another difficulty with holding a rental property right now is that it's a very difficult legal environment. The rules have changed more in the last 4 years than they did in the prior 40 years. So it takes a commitment of time to study the new laws, understand what they are, where they apply, and what's the best practice to address them. And a lot of times the best way to get around that is just hire a professional that is doing that for you. You go on about your life, makes it real easy for you. Let somebody else be that invested to take care of the time and effort needed to keep up with all the property management laws. Really, for about the price of a gardener, you can hire professional property management that takes care of everything for you. The other thing to consider is that capital gains tax will kick in on the property 3 years after the owner moves out of it. So if you want to sell your property sell it maybe before that 30-year anniversary, you're free of capital gains. But if you sell it after that, you'll owe it. So if you keep your property for 10 years and you have $300,000 in gain, you can owe about nearly $100,000 in tax the way the tax structure sits right now. And I think the last con for holding your rental property is that the government keeps changing the rules, and we don't know where they're going to go with that, but they can increasingly make it more and more difficult for landlords. So I always say don't bite off grief before we have it, but we're seeing a trend where they're making it more difficult, and it takes constant effort to know how to best handle it so that it doesn't adversely affect the landlord. The last con involves many people's greatest fear, which is, what if I get a horrible tenant that damages my house, stops paying rent, and I have to evict them? There are plenty of horror stories about these situations, and it can happen. Really good tenant selection almost completely eliminates this risk. With over 1,100 doors under management, Tyner Property Management has less than one eviction per year because we have such a solid application investigation process. If you are not confident in your abilities to find a good tenant, hire a professional property manager who is. We have a tool that you're welcome to use on our website, which is Tyner.com, Tiner.com, and it's a rent versus sell calculator. And you can put in your current value, what you paid for your property, what rent you'd get, and it'll calculate how much you would make, and it's an estimate, but how much you would make or how much you would lose if you sell it versus if you rent it. And you can compare the two. And I've looked through a lot of scenarios with people, and if they have fairly low interest rates, it's almost always money ahead to keep the property as a rental property, particularly for the first 3 years. And for many owners, it makes sense to go on and make it a long-term investment property. So what is the conclusion? In most cases, it makes sense to go ahead and keep your existing home as a rental property, at least for 3 years. And here's the other thing. Think about the market conditions right now. For the last couple of years, when interest rates shot up about 2 years ago, a lot of people who couldn't sell rented. So we've seen the rental market get a little bit saturated. But at some point, the interest rates are going to drop enough that all the buyers who've been wanting to get in the market will jump into the market. When all that pent-up demand from people who want to buy properties actually starts to be realized because the interest rates are low enough they can buy properties now, we're going to probably see a real increase in value. So the appreciation numbers and the potential over the next 3 years is fantastic for people who already own the property. They could easily see properties jump up 10, 20, 30% in value over the next few years when interest rates begin to drop and all these buyers come into the market. So hold that property because there's a very good likelihood it's going to pop up in value and you'll do really well with it. Feel free to visit our website at Tiner.com. That's Tiner.com. There's a ton of valuable information for you there. And if you're thinking about whether to rent or sell your home, we are glad to meet with you personally and answer your questions. You can call us at 916-974-6003 or email us at info@Tiner.com. We have so much more that we'd like to share, and we invite you to subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time.
John Tyner and or Tyner Property Management do not provide tax or legal advice. John is neither an attorney nor a tax professional. This material is prepared for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for tax or legal advice. You should consult an attorney and or tax professional for your specific needs and situation. If you would like to talk to us about professional property management for your rental home, you can reach us at 916-974-6003 or email us at info@Tiner.com. And you can also visit our website at Tiner.com.